The air inside Ink and Claw didn't smell like a tattoo parlor. It didn't smell of rubbing alcohol, stale cigarettes, or the sterile, clinical sting of blue soap. It smelled of sulfur, ancient parchment, and a dry, searing heat that made the very walls sweat and the heavy atmosphere shimmer with a golden liquid distortion. This was a heat that didn't just sit on the skin, it sank into the lungs, heavy and metallic, tasting of mountain roots and the deep, pressurized silence of the Earth's core. Jaxen, a man who seemed to be constructed entirely of corded muscle, obsidian-hard grudges, and the kind of terrifying stillness only found in granite peaks, stood behind the mahogany counter. His arms were crossed thick as tree trunks, and his skin was the color of hammered copper under a setting sun. His eyes were not human. They were twin pits of molten gold, slitted vertically, glowing with a light that had been forged in a furnace before the first city was ever built. Jaxen didn't use needles. He didn't use electric machines that buzzed like angry hornets. He didn't even use stencils. He used a single, clawed index finger that glowed with a white-hot, ethereal intensity, etching designs into human skin that felt less like tattoos and more like soul bindings. To be marked by Jaxen was to be altered at a molecular level. Calla, a woman with a history of jagged decisions and a penchant for the kind of trouble that wore a handsome face, stood at the threshold. On her heart was hammering against her ribs like a trapped bird in a chimney, soot-stained and frantic. She had heard the rumors in the dark corners of the internet and the hushed whispers of the midnight street, that if you wanted a mark that never faded, a mark that tied your physical form to the ley lines of the world, you went to the man with the fire in his hands. She stepped inside, and the door clicked shut with a heavy, final thud that sounded like a vault ceiling. The heat hit her like a physical blow, instantly parching her throat and making her vision swim. Jaxen didn't look up. He was hunched over a piece of ancient vellum, his brow furrowed in a concentration that looked like dormant volcanic anger. The walls around him were lined with the Hoard, not piles of gold coins, but artifacts of immense sentimental and magical weight. Broken swords from forgotten crusades, rusted brass gears from the world's first steam engines, and jars of iridescent sand from deserts that had long since been swallowed by the sea. Each item hummed with its own frequency, contributing to the low-level vibration that made Calla's teeth ache. "You're late," Jaxen rumbled. The sound didn't come from his throat so much as it rose from the floorboards, a low, tectonic vibration that made the glass cases tremble and the ink jars, filled with powdered gemstones and dragon scales, rattle on their shelves. "I don't give tattoos to people who don't respect the clock. Time is the only thing humans have in abundance, yet you waste it as if you could simply bake more of it in Silas's ovens across the street." "I'm sorry," Calla whispered, her voice cracking as the dry air stole her breath. "The rain. It's a deluge out there. The cobblestones are like ice. I had to walk from the station." Jaxen looked up then, and the full weight of his gaze hit her. It was the intensity of a predator assessing a threat to its cave. He didn't just see her face. He saw the way she carried her shoulders, the way she clutched her leather bag like a buckler, and the faint, yellowish bruise peeking out from the collar of her denim jacket. His posture shifted, the dragon within him uncoiling, sensing a scent of stale fear that didn't belong to him. It was the scent of a human who had been hunted by someone smaller, someone crueler. "Sit," he commanded, gesturing toward a heavy leather chair that looked more like an ancient sacrificial altar than a piece of furniture. "Tell me what you want, and tell me why you're really here. People don't come to Ink and Claw for aesthetics. They come to me for armor. They come because they are tired of being soft." Calla sat, the leather warm, nearly hot, against her jeans. She felt the heat of the shop beginning to melt the ice that had lived in her chest for months. "I want a dragon," she said, her voice finding its edge as she locked eyes with the golden pits of his. "Not a small, decorative one. I want one that covers my back. I want a beast that breathes. I want to feel the fire you've been hiding in this shop, I want to be marked so that I never forget that I am made of something that can survive a furnace. Jaxen walked over to her, his shadow stretching across the room, dark and jagged. He was massive, his presence displacing the air until Calla felt she was breathing him in. He leaned down, his face inches from hers, and she could smell the scent of wood smoke, ozone, and something ancient on his breath. "You don't know the weight of what you're asking for, little moth," he growled, his voice thick and honey-dark. "My ink isn't ink. It's my blood, distilled through fire. It's my essence, tempered by 1,000 years of solitude. If I mark you, you belong to the Hoard. You become part of the mountain's memory. You become mine to protect, and mine to claim. Is that what you truly want? To be claimed by a monster so the little men of your world stop trying to break you?" "I'm tired of being a moth," Calla said, her chin lifting. "I've spent my whole life being drawn to flames that just wanted to turn me to ash. I'm done hiding. I want to be the flame." Jaxen's eyes flared, the gold turning to a brilliant, blinding white for a split second. A slow, predatory smile touched his lips, a look of recognition. "Then let us see if you can handle the heat." So little moth. For the next several hours, the world outside the midnight street ceased to exist. The rain against the window became a distant, muffled memory as the interior of the shop transformed into a forge of the soul. Jaxen moved with a grace that was terrifying, his glowing finger tracing the lines of a massive, coiled dragon across Calla's spine. Every touch was a brand. It wasn't the sharp, stinging poke of a needle. It was a searing, heavy heat that traveled through her skin, into her nerves, and settled deep in the marrow of her bones. He worked in a silence that was heavy with intent. Calla didn't scream. She didn't cry. She gripped the iron arms of the chair until her knuckles were white as bone, her breath coming in ragged, shallow gasps. As the fire spread across her back, she began to see things, visions of gold-flecked clouds, of mountains that breathed, of the sound the earth makes when it dreams. She felt the weight of the tectonic plates shifting beneath her, the rhythmic pulse of the planet's core. She wasn't just receiving a tattoo. She was being hollowed out and filled with the dragon's fire. Jaxen watched her with an intensity that bordered on obsession. He saw every wince, every muscle spasm, and the way her spirit seemed to flare up to meet the pain. He realized she wasn't just enduring the ink. She was hungry for it. She was absorbing his strength, his history, his very heat. At around 4 a.m., the heavy brass bell on the door chimed, a cheerful, mundane sound that felt like a sacrilege in the charged atmosphere of the shop. Silas, the massive baker from the Silver Crumb across the street, pushed his way in. He was still wearing his charcoal apron, dusted in white flour, and he carried the scent of toasted sugar and yeast. He looked at the scene, the shirtless man glowing with internal fire, and the woman gripped in the throes of a spiritual forging, and didn't even blink. "Aye, Jaxen!" Silas rumbled, his hazel eyes flickering with a wolfish glint of amusement. "You're burning the midnight oil again. Literally. The whole street smells like a volcanic eruption, and Bane is complaining that your heat is making his lilies wilt." Silas set a box of warm, honey-glazed donuts on the counter, the steam from the fresh pastry curling into the dragon vapor. He looked at Calla, noting the way the molten gold design was already beginning to shimmer on her skin. "She's strong," Silas noted, his voice carrying a hint of genuine respect. "Most humans go into shock before you finish the first claw. You've found a fighter, dragon. Don't break her." Jaxen didn't stop his work, his glowing finger now tracing the intricate scales of the dragon's tail near Calla's waist. "She's not most humans," he growled, his voice thick with a strange new possessiveness. "She's the heart of the Hoard now, Silas. Go back to your dough." "Some things require a different kind of heat than a baker's oven." Silas laughed, a low, canine sound that vibrated in the small shop. "I see how it is. Just don't forget to feed her. Fire needs fuel, and even a new dragon needs her sugar. I'll leave these here." With a nod toward Calla, a silent welcome into the secret society of the street, the Alpha Baker disappeared back into the night. Jaxen finally pulled his hand away, the fire in his finger fading to a dull, throbbing red. He stepped back, his chest heaving as if he had just flown across an ocean. "It's done," he whispered, his voice uncharacteristically soft. Calla stood up slowly, her body humming with a new, rhythmic energy. She felt heavy, grounded, and strangely warm despite the damp air. She walked over to the scorched antique mirror on the wall and looked over her shoulder. The dragon on her back was a masterpiece of molten gold and charcoal shadows. It didn't look like ink, and it looked like a living entity etched into her very soul. The scales shimmered when she moved, and the dragon's eyes, positioned right between her shoulder blades, seemed to glow with a protective, silver light. "It's beautiful," she breathed, her hand reaching back to touch the warmth of her own skin. Jaxen walked up behind her, his hand resting on the nape of her neck. His touch was no longer the searing heat of the forge. It was a steady, grounding warmth that made her feel invincible. "You are part of the Hoard now, Calla. The dragon on your back is a covenant. If anyone tries to hurt you, they aren't just fighting a woman. They're fighting the mountain. They're fighting the fire. They're fighting me." Calla turned in his arms, the fear that had brought her to his door finally extinguished. She looked at the man who was a monster, and the monster who was a king, and she realized she hadn't just gotten a tattoo. She had found her home. She reached up, tracing the copper line of his jaw with a steady hand. "Then I think I'm exactly where I need to be." As the weeks turned into months, Calla's life became inextricably linked with the ink and claw. She moved into the apartment above the shop, a space filled with the scent of old books and the constant, comforting heat of the dragon below. She learned that Jaxen didn't sleep in a bed, but on a pile of ancient silk rugs surrounded by his most precious artifacts. She learned that he preferred his coffee, black as tar and hot as lava, and that he could tell the history of a person's lineage just by the rhythm of their heartbeat. She became the guardian of the shop's threshold. While Jaxen worked in the back, tracing fire into the skin of the worthy, Calla handled the walk-ins. She became an expert at spotting those who came for the wrong reasons, the tourists looking for a thrill, the hunters looking for a mark. She turned them away with a sharp look and a cold word, protecting the dragon's sanctuary with a fierce loyalty. The midnight street became her entire world. She spent her mornings with Silas at the bakery, helping him knead the massive mounds of dough while he told her stories of the old packs. She spent her afternoons in Bain's greenhouse, learning about the night-blooming flowers that only opened when the gargoyle sang. She was no longer a moth. She was a pillar of the community, or a human woman who had been forged in dragonfire and come out stronger on the other side. Jaxen's hoard grew, but it was no longer just a collection of cold objects. His most precious treasure was the sound of Calla's laughter echoing through the shop, the scent of her jasmine perfume in the sulphurous air, and the way she looked at him when the moon reached its peak. He had spent centuries guarding gold that couldn't love him back, but now he guarded a flame that could dance with his own. One night, a shadow from Calla's past returned, a man who thought he still owned her, a man who didn't believe in monsters. He stepped into the ink and claw with a sneer on his face, reaching out to grab Calla's arm. He didn't even get close. The air in the shop instantly turned to a searing, white-hot vacuum. Jaxen didn't even stand up from his workbench. He simply looked at the intruder, his eyes turning to twin suns of golden fury. The dragon on Calla's back began to glow, the scales rippling with a molten light that burned through her shirt. "You are standing in my hoard." Jaxen's voice was a landslide of pure terror. "And you are touching my heart. If you do not leave this street within the next 10 seconds, I will show you why the mountains are made of ash." the man didn't wait for a second warning. He fled into the night, his screams fading as he hit the rain-slicked cobblestones. Jaxen walked over to Calla, pulling her into his chest, and he didn't ask if she was okay. He simply held her until the fire in her back settled into a steady, comforting warmth. "I told you," he whispered into her hair. "You are the mountain now." The story of the dragon and his moth became a legend in the city, a tale told to those who felt small and forgotten. It was a reminder that even the most terrifying power can be a sanctuary, and that the only thing stronger than a dragon's fire is the woman brave enough to walk through it and claim it as her own. As the years passed, Calla's hair turned silver, but the dragon on her back never faded. It remained as bright and molten as the day it was forged, a testament to a bond that ignored the passage of time. Jaxen, the man of copper and flame, stayed by her side, his gold eyes never losing their glow. They were the heartbeat of the ink and claw, the fire and the flame, the mountain and the moth. And in the heart of the midnight street, where the bread was always warm and the flowers were made of stone, they were exactly where they were meant to be. The end of their story was never written, because legends don't end. They just become part of the wind that howls down the alleyways, part of the rain that slicks the stones, and part of the heat that rises from the earth when the moon is full. They became the very air of the midnight street, a promise that no matter how dark the night, there is always a fire waiting to bring you home. The street itself seemed to breathe in time with their shared warmth, a secret kept by the fog and the flickering gaslight. When winter came, the windows of ink and claw were the only ones that never frosted over, glowing like an amber beacon for anyone lost in the cold. Calla became more than a partner. She became Jaxen's conscience, reminding the ancient creature that even a beast made of fire could find peace in the quiet click of a tea kettle. Together they curated the hoard of the future, not of relics, but of moments. Jaxen learned to appreciate the ephemeral beauty of a human lifespan, realizing that its brevity made every second more precious than a diamond. He watched her age with a reverence that was almost holy, seeing every wrinkle as a map of their shared history. In the end, it wasn't the dragon who guarded the woman, but the love they built that guarded them both from the encroaching world. Midnight Street remained their kingdom, a place where the impossible was ordinary, and the monsters were the kindest souls you'd ever meet. And as the moon dipped below the horizon, Jaxen would always whisper the same truth to the woman in his arms, that of all the treasures he had gathered across 1,000 years, she was the only one that truly mattered. The flame and the forge remained one, forever etched into the spirit of the street. Every morning, the scent of cinnamon from Silas's ovens would mingle with the lingering smoke from the ink and claw, a reminder to the neighborhood that the world was safe as long as the dragon was awake. And so, the fire stayed lit, the mark stayed bright, and the midnight street continued its long, slow dance with the shadows, anchored by a man of flame and a woman who refused to be ash. Their legacy lived on in the whispers of the alleyways, a story of how a single mark could change the world, one heartbeat at a time. The midnight street was never just a location. It was a promise that even in the darkest city, there is a place where you can be seen for exactly what you are and loved for it anyway. And as the stars faded, the dragon and his moth closed their eyes, resting in the warmth of a life they had forged together, heart to heart, fire to fire.